All right. Thank you, everyone, for being here for the Peer Wellness Support with the Family Survival Trust information session. My name is Evvie, and I will be directing our session today. And we have a presentation. And then after the presentation, there will be time for questions and answers. So I will go ahead and get started on the first slide. So today, during this information session, we'll be going through just introducing what peer wellness support is, some of the benefits offered by peer wellness support, more about me, who will be the peer wellness specialist for the Family Survival Trust, how it works, how you can sign up for it. I'll go through some frequently asked questions that were submitted by some of you in your registration, and then we'll have time for a Q&A just in case there are additional questions that aren't answered in the frequently asked questions. All right. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is what is peer wellness support or peer support. And so peer wellness support is a person-centered approach to navigating mental health challenges, substance abuse recovery, or the lasting effects of trauma. The support is provided by a peer wellness specialist with lived experience of similar challenges who has received specialized training. Um, so specialists are individuals who have lived experience of similar struggles, and the training is meant to help us learn how to provide empathetic and non-judgmental support. Um, some of what we do is to support people with the gaps between the other supports they have. So if you're in therapy or in other support groups, um, there can sometimes be gaps in that support that's offered, and peer wellness support can be something that is a non-hierarchical connection, a support person who can help with advocacy and problem solving and wellness planning and things like that. So we'll get more into detail with that with the next slide. All right. So, what does a peer wellness specialist actually do? So, these are the the four main areas that we offer support. A peer wellness specialist will offer support. And so, this is up to you. It doesn't mean that you have to engage with all of these areas of support, but this is just what's available if you're working with someone who's a peer wellness specialist. And this is what will be available through the Family Survival Trust peer wellness support sessions. So we'll start with emotional support. So essentially providing a compassionate ear, someone to listen, to processing emotions, sharing feelings, maybe sharing coping strategies and ways to build resilience and well-being. Another area is resource navigation and advocacy. And this is one of the areas that I think particularly can be a gap, because it may be something that you don't have time, for example, to go over with your therapist to, for example, like help someone to help you find resources for support that are local to you or that are online, someone to help you connect with supportive services, and also someone to support you with advocating for yourself with the other supports that you're accessing, things like healthcare, housing, and recovery programs. So, an example of that might be that if, something that I've struggled with and needed support with was calling the doctor and making a doctor's appointment, because it's just something that caused me a lot of anxiety. And so it was helpful for me to just have someone to sit with me while I make the call. And that's something that a peer wellness specialist can do for you and with you, to just be, we could be on a call. And if you need to make some calls to set something up for yourself, then there can just be someone to sit with you and to support you, or if you, for example, have a meeting or something that's coming up with a doctor or therapist and you want to strategize questions that you want to ask or ways to advocate for yourself, then that's also something that we could do in a session. So this is something that I feel particularly um, I guess, passionate about, because I feel very, very strongly about self advocacy and learning those skills. The next section, skill development and wellness planning. So these are more practical skills, things like goal setting, safety planning, if you're wanting to create a safety plan for yourself. And that can be a variety of different kinds of safety plans. It could be something like an emergency plan, like, setting up a couple of people that you would call in the case of emergencies and strategizing how to speak with those people or to ask them if they're willing to be a part of your care team. Um, Another thing I can support with is emotional literacy. So that's essentially things like learning what are the names of emotions, building your emotional vocabulary, and learning how to identify what emotions that you're feeling. So I can, with you, like in a consent centered way, help create more of a tailored recovery and wellness plan that aligns specifically with your needs. And this is something that's directed by you, because as a peer, I am there to accompany you, but I'm not, there's no hierarchy like there might be with other clinicians, like a doctor or a therapist, because the thing that we're relying on really is both the training and also the lived experience. But we're someone to walk alongside you, not to be telling you what to do. So in a session, you would come to me and tell me what it is that you want to work on, what are the goals that you want to address, um, what resources that you would like to explore, and then I'm there to support you in accessing those things. And then the last section of support is like community and relationship support. So that's things like working on healthy communication, if you're wanting to explore setting boundaries. And I know that's something that I have spent a lot of time working on for myself, and that I had to learn after having the experience with being in a cult, and also with navigating relationships with family members who remained inside the cult. Um, and then another thing that can be helpful to have some support with is strategizing how to build a stronger support network and navigating complex interpersonal dynamics, that it just would be helpful to have someone alongside you to talk through those things, to talk about how it feels, and to create some strategies, maybe even to role play conversations that you want to have, or that you're looking forward to. So those are the four main areas that a peer wellness specialist can offer support. All right. So before we get into more details about me, I just want to share why peer wellness support is helpful. Um, it offers personalized support, so it's different than if you are someone who attends the Family Survival Trust um, group sessions. That is obviously a group where there's a conversation between multiple people, and we share the space to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to speak. But in a peer wellness session, that session is all about you. So you don't have to share the space or the time with anyone else. And it is completely led by you. And so you get to come and bring what you want to work on. And sometimes this can help fill gaps that are between other things that you're doing, like therapy, community services, and peer groups. So that is one of the reasons why I like it, because sometimes it can be helpful just to have one on one support that is not necessarily clinical, but it is offered by someone like a peer who has similar lived experience. All right, so now we'll get into a little more about me. So this is a little bit more about me and the training that I've done, and as well as my lived experience. I do have more than 15 years of lived experience with cult survivorship, including as someone who's a family member of people who remain in the cult. Um, and I have lived experience with mental health recovery and chronic illness. There is a limit to the mental for to the lived experience that I have. I will just be honest about that. And so that doesn't mean that it's not that these areas where I don't have lived experience aren't something that we can talk about, but it's just a limitation that I think it's important to acknowledge. For example, I'm not a parent. And so I don't have lived experience of having a child who was recruited into a cult. The experiences that I have are about, my siblings or parents, grandparents, aunts and uncles, cousins. So I do have lots of experience with family members being involved in coercive and controlling groups, but not specifically being a parent. Um, so that's just something I wanted to state because I know that was one of the questions that was asked in the registration. Um, as far as my training, I am a certified peer wellness specialist and registered in the state of Oregon. I completed an 80-hour peer wellness specialist training with the Mental Health and Addiction Association of Oregon in the US. I also hold a bachelor's degree in social sciences. And in addition to my peer wellness specialist training, I have specialized training in trauma informed facilitation and somatics, which is the study of the physical and emotional impacts of trauma. And then lastly, I have worked with many different groups of people. And so I have a lot of experience working with diverse groups of people, including LGBTQIA plus people, disabled and chronically ill, homeless, neurodivergent, and people of color. So that's about me. And that's what I will be bringing to our sessions as far as training and lived experience. All right. So, frequently asked questions. These are questions that I was able to put some questions together that were based on questions that you sent in, or that people who registered sent in for registering for this session. And so, thank you for doing that. There were some questions I just want to acknowledge that seemed more appropriate for maybe an email or a private conversation because they were specific to people's situations. So you can see if any of these frequently asked questions do answer your question. And if they don't, then we can have those conversations offline. I just wanted to make sure that since we're recording, that we didn't ask questions that were so specific that they could potentially identify someone. And so that's why we aren't addressing the very specific questions, but it doesn't mean that we're ignoring your question or that we won't answer them. It just means that we want to answer them in a different context. All right. So one of the questions is there a cost? And thankfully, there's no cost. This is part of my 100-hour internship that I'm doing with the Mental Health and Addiction Association of Oregon. And so it is funded by a grant, and that internship period will be ending on the 30th of April, 2025. So no cost to any of the sessions that you schedule. So, what is the format of the sessions, the format of the sessions, and how often can they happen? So, the formats of the session are private one on one. They are hosted on a doxy.me, which is a secure telemedicine platform, and it does meet all of the requirements for several different countries' privacy rules. It doesn't collect any participant information. Um, and like I stated before, the sessions are participant driven and they can be scheduled up to once or twice a month, depending on availability. Oh, let me go back. I didn't answer the last question. So another question is whether you could receive support between sessions, such as by email or text. And because the hours are limited, and because, that's part of having boundaries too for me, that while I can't offer support in between sessions, one thing we can do is to strategize within your session how to set up support for yourself so that if you are going to need support between sessions, then we can make a plan, for who you would contact, setting up a care team, how to set up a more robust support system, those sorts of things. All right, who are these sessions for, and are they suitable for people in different stages of recovery? So the sessions are suitable for a wide range of participants. It includes if you have left a cult, if you're in therapy and navigating any kind of legal processes, or are further along in your recovery journey. And it also is appropriate for people who are family members of people who have been harmed in cults, appropriate for people who are born and raised or recruited. So they are open to any of the participants really who would be engaging with the Family Survival Trust in one of our general sessions. And then the other thing about this is that if you are interested in this and you haven't been a part of the general sessions, then it's still open to you. And so this might be a way to engage if it feels like the general session maybe isn't exactly what you need, but having more one-on-one support could be helpful from a cult survivor perspective or from someone with lived experience of cult harm, then the sessions are also open to you. Um, there was a question about how the sessions are trauma informed. And just to say that within the training, peer wellness support and peer wellness specialist training, the training was very focused on being trauma informed, on being consent centered, and really centering the participants' needs and goals. And so that is a central focus of what peer support is that it is trauma informed and that it is focused on making sure that there's no hierarchy, that it's a judgment free space. And then the last frequently asked question we have is, what if I only want a single session? And that's fine. It's really up to you. The sessions are flexible and it could be a one-time resource or it could be part of your ongoing support plan, just depending on what it is that you need. So next we'll move into how it works, how you can sign up. All right. So to schedule a session, what you'll do is you'll go to the link, and this will be included in an email that you get after the session with, the link to the recording and a handout that has the details of how to sign up. So don't feel like you need to remember this link. But the link is a Calendly link, and that's for you to be able to schedule a session, and it will make sure that the sessions are scheduled around my schedule so that I don't have any conflicts. The sessions are in the evenings, as are most Family Survival Trust offers that we have. They're on Monday and Wednesday, and then twice a month on Saturday evenings. And then I mentioned before that the sessions happen virtually on a platform called doxy.me, which is a web-based telemedicine platform. And that platform is web-based, which I like because it doesn't require you to download an app or anything like that. It's just something that you can access through a browser. So it's very easy to access and the barriers are low. It's not complicated to be able to log in and use the platform. And then the platform also doesn't save any of your information, and it doesn't record or anything like that. So it is a telemedicine platform that's used by medical professionals and therapists and things like that around the world. And so it's compliant with a variety of different privacy regulations in different countries. All right. So the last thing I'll say is that for scheduling, this is the last thing I'll say before we get into the question and answer session. And so if you do have questions, then you can go ahead and put them in the chat. I believe the chat is turned on. And so you can send that chat to Joy or you can send it to me. But my request would just be that if you do want to schedule a session, which that link is live, so you can schedule the session as early as today, like you can begin scheduling the sessions and they start next week. My request would just be that you start with scheduling one session at first. And then in that session, we can plan for the best frequency based on the goals and support that you're wanting. And I also ask that because that will allow as many people as are interested to schedule with me at least once for the first 30 days so that I can make sure that there's support for, some support for everyone who wants it, because I do have a limited amount of hours. There's about 3 or maybe 4 sessions available each week, depending on whether we've had the general support group or not. So to make sure that I'm not going over the hours that I'm allotted for the internship, I do have to limit the amount of sessions that I have each week. And so that's why I say, like, just for the first, you know, the first schedule, if you could schedule one. And then after that, if you are wanting to have regular sessions, like to schedule once or twice a month, then you can schedule those all at once after, to make sure, like, maybe if you want to have a standing time that's available. So and then I don't know if I mentioned, but the sessions are 40 to 45 minutes long. And that's to allow me some time for just documenting what I've done. But I don't document anyone's name or personal information. But as a part of my internship, I do have to report, like, what have I done? How many people have I worked with and things like that. So that's to give me some time to document after my sessions happen. All right. So we'll move into a question and answer session if you have them, and you can share them in the chat. And then if we don't have questions, then we will be finished. But I'll give a few minutes to let people ask questions if you would like. Thank you. Someone just sent me a very kind message. Doesn't have a question though, so I won't read that. But okay, so maybe some clarification about family members. So and yes, I can share the Calendly link in the chat. I will do that. So there is a question about family members and maybe just wanting to clarify if this is available for family members. And yes, it is. While I don't have the experience of not being in a cult and having a family member who was recruited, so that's not lived experience I do have lived experience with navigating, managing relationships with family members who are in a cult when I'm not. So me having left and then my family having stayed in the cult. And so that is something that I would be able to hold space for. And then, just depending on what your goals are as a person who's navigating that, then if there's things like wanting to process how it feels, like the emotional toll that it can take to have a family member who's in a cult, if you're wanting to process, I know some people are involved in like legal things, and it could be helpful to just have a place to talk about that or vent about that. If you're looking for resources for support for yourself, that's another thing that I could support you with. So there's a variety of ways that I could support you. And if you have other ideas of things that I haven't mentioned, then you can just let me know. And then, we can see. I'm pretty good at locating resources, especially things that are available online. And so that's something I would be happy to support you with if you're a family member of someone who's been recruited. Let's see. Someone asked about how I work around different time zones. So I've set up the sessions so that they're in the evenings, UK time. So for me, that it's during the day because I'm in Central America and I'm about 6 hours behind people who are in London. And that there is somewhat of a limitation that I wouldn't be able to work like during to offer meetings during the daytime, um UK time, because that would be in the middle of the night for me. So the sessions are limited to being in the evening, and I know that might be a restriction for some people, but I had hoped that having it in the evening, which is around the same time that we have other things like the general support sessions and the family of sessions, that it would just offer some consistency. So it's in the evenings, but it's not on the days that we typically would be having other meetings. Okay. And then I'll answer the question about Saturday because that is also related to scheduling. So instead of I do have sessions available on Saturdays. They are also in the evening on Saturday. Um, and the sessions are available around the same time. It's from about 7 to 10, I think, UK time, 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. So they're in the evening. I think if there was like a kind of case by case thing, or no, I think they're from 5 to 8, actually. Sorry, I don't know why I said 7 to 10. From 5 p.m. to 8. Um, and so they are in the evening time. If there is like a case by case thing where someone wanted to have maybe a one off session and they wanted it to be a little bit earlier, I might be able to accommodate that. But I also am typically like working during the day myself. And so I just need to make sure that I'm holding those boundaries. Um, let's see. Okay, so since I am struggling with multitasking, I'm going to stop and put the Calendly link in the chat so that you can have that, and then I'll go on to the next. Okay, so there's a question that's more specific about strategies when feeling trauma resurface and resources, specifically for coping with shunning. And what I will say to this is that um, these are things that we definitely can cover in a session. I don't know off the top of my head like resources. And the other thing about resources is that everyone the resources that would support each person are different, because we all have different needs. And so, one of the things that is helpful for a peer wellness session is that the resources that we would be looking for, or that I would look for and share, would be related to something that, that is specific for you. So it could be like me supporting you with finding local resources for you if you wanted to find something that's in person, or finding something that's within your time zone preference, and also um, finding resources that are the types of resources that you want, whether that's things that are virtual, whether that's, an affinity group with like a particular group of people, like other people of color or people who are of a certain age or gender. So these are things that I can support with in a session. But I don't have an answer for right now. But that's a great question, and that's exactly the sorts of things that I would be happy to support someone with in a session. Um, so someone mentioned wanting, like, let's see. So facing difficulties that are adjacent to cult related things, like, for example, work situations that might be intensified by trauma, and um, asking if these sorts of things are relevant for these sessions. And yes, that's something that I do think is common to, encounter. Is, I mean, I know I definitely have experienced having a workplace that can feel coercive, and sometimes I think work in general can feel coercive because there is such a power dynamic with, like, them being um it being an environment where if, you're not pleasing the workplace, that then your livelihood is threatened. And so I do think that there's kind of an inherent coercive nature to work sometimes, and that can be really activating for people who have experienced cultic harm. So that's definitely something that we could talk about and process, and, like, look for resources and support, and that I could personally offer lived experience support with, because that's something that I definitely have experienced myself. So yes, that is relevant for a peer support session. So thanks for asking that question. Um, for the email, so what will happen when you sign up for a session? Then you'll have you will get a link to the space to meet, in doxy.me. And during that time, when you're registering, if there's a specific topic that you want to address, that, for example, like maybe a resource that you would like me to look up before our session, then you can send a note to me in your registration for your session, just letting me know that, so that I can have a heads up about that. And the sessions do need to be scheduled. The platform allows sessions to be scheduled 36 hours in advance, so they can't be scheduled um, more, like, closer to the time than that. And that is to give me some time, if you do put in, like, something that you want me to look up ahead of time, to give me some time to look up some resources. And also just to make sure that I don't have any double bookings or things like that, because my schedule might shift. And then otherwise, as far as sending like emails, if you want to ask a question about peer support, or especially if you have like a really specific question, you can send it to the Family Survival Trust email, and that will be sent to me. And that would be specifically if, like, you have a specific question that maybe isn't appropriate for this forum where we're recording, but it might be about peer support. Or if you need to reschedule or something, you can do that in Calendly, but you could also send an email just to let me know if you've scheduled something and you need to reschedule, or the time doesn't work or something like that. So I haven't thought about, like, the personal emails in between, because I know that that can be tricky as far as, like, boundaries, and just making sure that I am not, you know, doing, like, email back and forth with people in between sessions, because that's not something that I am going to be offering, just for the purposes of, like, making sure that I stay in the hours. But if it is a pressing question, then I think the Family Survival Trust email would be the best place to send that. And then Joy may answer that if it's something that she can answer, or she may send it to me if it's something that I need to respond to. All right. Let's see. Okay, so I think I answered the question about being able to chat with me outside of a particular session as far as the timing. I would say, like, yeah, send any questions about timing to the Family Survival Trust. I will say that there won't be much that I can accommodate outside of the session. It might be something that could happen once. But in order to just make, it easy for people to schedule and also for me to keep track, I do think it's important to use the Calendly because I can be very absent-minded. And so the Calendly will make sure that nothing will get scheduled during a time that I have something else going on because it'll block out time on the calendar. For example, if I have a doctor's appointment or something like that, or if I have another work meeting, it will not allow someone to schedule a session with me during a time that I have something else on my calendar. So that's the best way that I found to keep track of these things because it can be um yeah, it can just get messy if I'm trying to schedule things via email when don't have access to my calendar. So that's both to protect me and to protect you all from being disappointed if I get confused and schedule something when I really am not available. All right. So, from what I can see, I think that that is all the questions. Of course, if you have more questions in the future, then you're welcome to email the Family Survival Trust um, and let Joy know that you have a question for me, or you can just go ahead and schedule a question. Like you don't need to be afraid, or sorry, schedule a session. You don't need to be afraid of scheduling the session or like taking a session away from someone else. That's part of why I wanted to make sure that the first 30 days that people just schedule one session just to make sure that it is a good fit for you and to give as many spaces available for as many different people to schedule as possible. So if it is something that you're feeling like it could be helpful for you, even if you're not absolutely certain, then it's okay to go ahead and schedule a session. And then we can talk about, what are your goals? What are the things that you would like support with? And is this the appropriate space? And if it's not, then I also might be able to help you find another resource that could be more appropriate. So it doesn't mean that just because if I'm not able to support you with it, that that you shouldn't schedule. It just means that maybe there will be, some time that we spend looking for other resources that could support you in a more appropriate way. And I would be very happy to do that. All right. So I'm going to end here.